Hello and welcome to the Monday show here on the Everything is Black and White podcast. I'm Andrew Musgrove and joined by usual by our Newcastle United editor Aaron Stokes. We're going to look back on a crushing defeat to Arsenal, preview the game with Blackburn in the FA Cup, talk about Newcastle women's making it to the League Cup final, and Eddie Howe's public hope that Joelinton signs a new deal and just how important that is to United's future. We're coming to you live on YouTube. Please give the video a thumbs up and across our podcast channels. Thanks as always for joining us. Let's get on with the show. Aaron, hello. Good weekend?
Well, a good weekend until about 1 minute past 8 on Saturday night, and then it took a turn for the worst. Wanted to come on here and have a lovely, positive Monday afternoon chat, and I've got a sneaky feeling that it might not be as positive as we hope.
No, I think we all expected that defeat. It was probably the manner that stings a little bit more. I had a lovely weekend. I planted some snowdrops at Joelinton National Trust, handed me a shovel, and what's funny?
You're just such a dad, honestly.
When you get to a certain age, you realise that a National Trust membership is one of the best things you can buy.
When you nearly hit 40, is that what
I'm not that old. I'm not. I think I was 25, 26 when I signed up. Don't knock it. But yeah, a lovely weekend. The only thing that did sour it was Newcastle United men's, because they did pretty awful, let's be honest. But Newcastle United women's, they had a very good weekend. And that's where we're going to start. We're going to start the show on a real positive, because that's right, Newcastle United women's are into a cup final. They beat Portsmouth 2-1 at St James Park thanks to a late goal from Georgia Gibson. 23,000 people filled in to see the lasses in what was Becky Langley's 100th game in charge. What a fantastic achievement, flying high in the League 2, set for promotion, and now the chance to lift the League Cup. They'll face #United, which is quite the name, #United, but that's who they'll face in the final. That'll take place at Kilnworth Road in March. A super achievement, and one quite rightly that everyone at the club are proud of, and everyone on Tyneside, and everyone that's just linked to Newcastle United should be so proud of the lasses getting to the final and hopefully going that one step further than the men's team did last year, and they can win it.
Absolutely. I really wish that everyone that's listening and watching this podcast could have heard your reaction today when you saw that they were playing #United in the final. It was, as I say, a real dad. Who on earth are they? #United.
#United just doesn't seem real.
But yeah, look, on a serious note, fantastic achievement by the women. Very, very, positive to see so many again at St James's Park. I know they didn't obviously hit that target of getting 100,000 in across the 4 games, but still, to have well over 20,000 in the ground is a fantastic achievement. And look, it just goes to show that all the time and effort and patience that the ownership and the club have had with the women's team is come to fruition. They're absolutely storming the 3rd division and look, on course to achieve back-to-back promotions. They're going to be in the final next month, which they've got a really, really big chance of winning. So yeah, one positive from a negative weekend.
Really inspirational to see the women doing really well. To all the young lasses out there who've got a dream of playing football professionally, they'll look at that and be inspired. But also great to see so many local lasses as well living the dream, because there are a lot of Geordies in that team, and they'll be pinching themselves the fact that they're not only playing for Newcastle United, but playing for Newcastle United that is backed by proper investment, and now playing for Newcastle United, not only top of the league, but in a cup final.
Yeah, that's a great point, because we've seen quite a lot of change at the women's side this team, and this season, a lot of incoming players from higher divisions in different regions, but there is still that core of Geordie players in there who, as you say, are doing fantastically well. And look, hopefully they can end the trophy hoodoo next month.
A year ago today, Newcastle United faced Manchester United in the League Cup, and it didn't work for the men's side. But just a final point on the women's side, it would have been very easy for Anna Staveley when she bought the club to come in and just reference the point about the women's side, reference the point that she's going to invest or she wants to see them well. It would have been a very easy PR stunt to do that, but it's not been a stunt. She is fully invested in seeing this team grow and become the best it can possibly be, and that is absolutely brilliant to see as well.
Yeah, Staveley, if you remember when she came in and made those outlandish comments about the Newcastle men's team and wanting to win Premier Leagues and Champions Leagues, which is all very well and good, but we thought was, uber ambitious. There was similar promises made about the women's team, already, they were sitting in the 4th division, and Amanda Staveley was talking about the WSL and getting them up 4 divisions. But anybody who's been to these games or anyone who's been, behind the scenes at the training sessions knows that Amanda Staveley is absolutely in awe of the women's team and absolutely in awe of Becky Langley. They look like they're more sort of friends these days than they are actually colleagues. She's at every game pretty much. You see her going into the dressing room, giving team talks. She's on the pitch before and after a game. And it's just fantastic to see that, as you say, they weren't empty words, and they are really giving it a good go to make the women's team equally as successful as the men's.
Yeah, she got a little bit emotional yesterday. Then Amanda Staveley was in that shot that we usually see. And when both sides, the men and women's side, when they win, they have the dressing room photograph, and Amanda Staveley was in that at the front, like we say, fully invested in seeing the women's side being the best they can, and fantastic to see them into the final, and good luck to them next month. We will talk more about that when the time comes around. Right now, from high to a low. We've had a positive start of the show. We're going to have to talk about the lows of Saturday night. You've been better off watching Saturday night takeaway than watching Newcastle take on Arsenal. Thumped 4-1 at the Emirates. In a game, I know there were very few positives. It's fair to say, isn't it, that was the worst first half of football we've seen in Eddie Howe.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think I actually thought it at the time on Saturday night, and I thought, you know what, maybe I'll feel a little bit different when I've slept on it, and I wait 48 hours to do the pod, but I feel exactly the same as I did on Saturday night. And I've actually got some stats here written down just to reference how awful Newcastle were.
We don't need to be reminded.
In that first half. When they went 2-0 down, 52% of the game had been played in Newcastle's final third. In the first half in total, Arsenal had 12 shots to Newcastle's 0. Newcastle had 1 touch in Arsenal's box. Alexander Isak had 10 touches. I suspect a couple of those were from kickoff as well. They only committed 3 first half fouls, which I know sounds like a bit of a positive, but actually I think it goes to show just how toothless they were. No wonder Alan Shearer was ranting and raving on Twitter during the first half. And interestingly, it was the first time in 10 years since Newcastle played at Southampton in 2014 that they didn't register a shot on target in the first half in a Premier League game. Just absolutely, as I say, toothless. They looked like they didn't want to be there. No energy. This looked like the Newcastle team back in October and November who were playing 3 games a week and weren't training and looked leggy.
Yeah, I mean, it looked like a performance under a previous manager.
It did, and a lot of people have seen this. And I think if it was a performance under a previous manager, the stick that we would be seeing would be tenfold as to what we're seeing now, rightly or wrongly. Look, to add a bit of context, Arsenal were fantastic. They were very good. You can see why they're really going to go close in the title race. But Newcastle United could not have made it any easier for them on Saturday night.
Well, I think that's probably the main point, isn't it? We can discuss personnel, which we will do. We can talk about systems, which we're going to, but it's largely irrelevant if you don't match the want and desire of the team you're playing. And as you said, Arsenal are an elite side, and I think they will push Man City closest to the title. That's even more reason not to just hand them the advantage, because right from the first whistle, they had the intensity, the press, and the organisation, and the fight. Newcastle didn't. And yet again, it felt quite noticeable, actually, when the goals were flying in, that there was very little reaction from the players, hands on hips, shrug of the shoulders, but there was no anger, no encouragement, no fight. And that really worries me. And that was, after the goals, but also, like I say, right from the word go, you knew who was going to win that game.
Oh, yeah. I mean, from literally the first or second minute, didn't you? You knew that Arsenal were just going to completely dominate. And what annoys me is the fact that you look at 2 of the previous 3 games against Arsenal, the win against Arsenal back in November and the 0-0 draw in January of 2023. Firstly, the November win, there was so much grit and passion. You had Bruno charging it. People, I know he couldn't do that on Saturday because he faces that suspension, but you had them really going man for man, and Arsenal were rattled. And St James's Park obviously played a part, but Newcastle wanted it more than Arsenal that night. Then you go back to the last January where they set up pretty similar and they wanted to soak up a lot of pressure, but they were winning balls. They were defending compact and deep, but they were actually, suffocating Arsenal at times. There was absolutely none of that on Saturday. It just looked like a training exercise for a lot of it for Arsenal. And it also looked like there was only a team that actually wanted it, and it was Arsenal.
I suppose the question many people will be asking is why? How? How do Newcastle United, after a week of training, get to that point where, like we say, literally from the first kick, they were just second best?
I think the problem runs deeper than just Saturday. I think if you look at the last 5 or 6 games, Newcastle don't look like they've got that
Energy.
energy. They don't look like they've got that ruthless, nasty side about them anymore. They're obviously shipping goals like nobody's business. I think it's 25 in the last 8 league games, maybe 12 in the last 4. The defence is all at sea. I mean, the defence, it was an absolute horror show from a couple of them on Saturday night, which I know we'll go on to. But I think, if you look at 2 months ago at where this season was, and it was looking like it was going to be an absolute car crash, and then they have the little mini winter break, and actually, they hadn't actually lost a game before Saturday since the Man City game before that break, and you thought, okay, this is maybe going to be the turning point. Now you're looking at it and thinking, actually, that Luton and Bournemouth were really bad results, and the Arsenal game now is a really bad result. And it just adds even more pressure on it tomorrow and even beyond that.
I mean, I got a message on, would have been Friday morning off someone who listens to the podcast, and they said, far too negative. If someone was listening to this podcast for the first time, they wouldn't come back. But we have to be honest, and we have to, when we're discussing Newcastle United, we can't sit here and just find the positives when there aren't any. And if you look on Saturday, the only real positives that you could probably point out was
there is a couple.
Karius had a decent enough game that if he starts again on Tuesday against Blackburn, I'm not fearing him because I thought he made a few good saves.
Okay.
Joe Willock and Alexander Isak back in the fold.
Willock, I mean,
but in terms of the way they set up, in terms of the way they played, that for me outweighs any positive.
I think we can add a few more positives.
Let's
not try to be too doom and gloom. I think Willock is. I mean, Isak is obviously huge, but Willock was, I thought, fantastic when he came on. Really good to get his goal.
Full of energy, direct running.
And I think one thing that has been evident in the last 3 or 4 weeks is that this midfield three does not work together. They're too one-paced. They're too similar. You need an enforcer in there. And you also, I think, need someone who's going to score goals, and that is Joe Willock in that midfield. He was really, really good when he came on. Isak getting through that game unscathed, big positive. Thought he looked good second half when he actually got some touches of the ball. Bruno avoided another game of a yellow card.
Didn't have a good game though.
Well, come on, we're talking about the positives here.
We're scraping the barrel.
No, but I mean,
it is a positive.
If it's a positive, so I'm going to name it.
It is a positive, but you don't want to be like sitting here like and that's the good thing that he did on Saturday. He invited yellow card. You want to be sitting here and saying he had this class assist or he scored these 2 goals.
Yeah, but we could be sat here talking about the fact that Bruno is now going to miss Wolves and Chelsea or the next 2 league games, and we're not.
Okay, we'll take that right.
Come on, we've been so doom and gloom so far. Do I want to say this one? They were better second half for 15, 20 minutes of the spell. I think whatever House said at them at half time worked up until that 3rd goal, which completely sucker punched them. And I mean, could you argue that it's a positive that Howe changed it at the back and brought Tino in?
Well, Peter says here Dan Burn assists as a positive.
Dan Burn assists. Dan Burn with more assists now, I believe, in the last 2 seasons than Miggy Almiron. More goal contributions this season than Miggy Almiron at the other end of the pitch. There was a few positives to take. It wasn't all negative. But Willock and Isak were the 2 big.
And we will get onto Willock in a moment. But I think for me, the concern is that the 1 or 2 negatives keep coming up every single week, and this is the big issue because Newcastle United on paper are favourites against Blackburn. They should be Blackburn, a championship side who have changed the manager. They've not seen that manager bounce. It's 5 games that will win. I think it's 4 draws and 1 defeat.
Yeah.
So they should win on paper. They've got the better quality. But Blackburn are a championship side with some decent enough players. And if Newcastle afford them the space and time and don't dominate, then they may get found out. And then you look at Wolves and Neto going against it before. My concern is that we're coming back every single week saying the gap between the midfield and defence, that's when Newcastle United are vulnerable. They're vulnerable on the counter. And again, the reaction to the goals conceded, it was the same against Luton, it was the same against Bournemouth. Where is Trippier going over to someone and just giving them a shake? Where is, someone doing more than just, they've conceded a goal? Because for me, that's really disappointing. It just spells out that they feel like there's no point.
Yeah, it goes back to what we were saying a couple of minutes ago, doesn't it? I think they've lost that little bit of hunger that made them such a huge force last season, earlier this season, where you could tell they were really, really up for it. And I think it goes hand in hand, the fact that they're conceding so many goals. If they were keeping clean sheets galore like they were last season, it makes the job 10 times easier to pick yourselves up again. But when you've shipped 4 at Bournemouth, you've conceded against Luton. 4 at Luton, 2 at Bournemouth. It's harder to G yourself up, and that's when you need the likes of Trippier and Shea to stand up. I think they were both poor Saturday. Botman, worst performance we've seen by him by a country mile, and it was no surprise that his form dominated that press conference this morning. There was 5 or 6 questions solely on Sven Botman, which we've never really heard before. But just going back to the midfield point, what does Howe do? Until Saturday, he had no options. He's had to play that midfield 3. He said on Friday in the press conference, "I've got competition in all places of the team now, apart from the midfield." But that midfield as a 3, individually, I like them all, but as a 3, they just don't work. The gaps are far too evident.
I think what he'll do on Tuesday, he'll take Lewis Miley out and he'll go with Sean Longstaff, Bruno, and Joe Willock. For me, Longstaff's the one that needs to drop out because I think Lewis Miley, look, he's looking tired. Of course, you want to give him a bit of a rest, but if you're talking form, might be the wrong word, but who's looking better in the side? Longstaff does not look better than Lewis Miley. I think Lewis Miley is much more effective. There was a lovely pass to Miggy on Saturday. I think Miggy was offside and he wasted the chance. But for me, Longstaff just isn't with the races.
Longstaff
isn't at the races. Sorry,
Longstaff isn't at the races, and I think it's hard to actually pen down the last time Longstaff had a really good game. I mean, even that game that he scored 2 in at St James's Park he didn't really do much else.
But he's going to start. He'll start on Tuesday.
You think?
Yeah, 100%. I'm confident he'll start because every time I was asked about Miley, he's talked about he needs a rest. He hasn't got the options. Well, now he's got Joe Willock to come in. So I can only see one change being made there. But on the whole midfield issue, okay, he hasn't got that defensive player to come in and protect the back 4. But is there an argument? And this was the big discussion before the game against Arsenal, the big discussion afterwards. And let us know what you think in the comments. Should Eddie Howe have gone 5 at the back? Should he have gone 3 at the back and then packed the midfield?
Yeah.
What do you think he should have done? For me, I wouldn't have been against him going at 5 at the back, dropping Burn alongside Sharon, Botman, Trippier, Livramento, and just trying to shore up. If you're going to get bypassed in midfield, then at least you've got a bit more protection with 5 at the back.
Well, I actually thought that was what he would do. There was loads of whispers towards the back end of last week that actually, they'd been trying this in training and going 5 at the back. And I actually put a tweet out shortly before kickoff, putting 11 side by side, and one of them was Burn, Botman, Share at the back, Trippier, Livramento on either flanks as a wing back, the normal 3 midfield, Gordon and Isak up top. I think you probably would have stood a lot better chance. We've actually seen that 5 at the back work in the very few instances that Eddie Howe's actually done it. I mean, we have seen it quite regularly when he's trying to shore up these games when they're seen out a lead. But I think the Emirates away, given how free scoring Arsenal have been, Porto aside, it was probably the perfect
time to do it.
Porto
played 5 at the back, didn't they?
Yeah, they did. And actually, they really frustrated Arsenal on that night midweek. And also, that's another thing that we haven't touched on, but this was an Arsenal team who had a really tricky fixture midweek, and Newcastle had the break.
Didn't seem that way.
Did not seem that way at all. So yeah, I think Saturday was probably the game out of all to switch it up, because I don't like saying that any game's a free hit, but if you wanted any game of the recent weeks to be a free hit, it would probably be Arsenal away from home.
Tuesday night he's not going to switch it to 5. He'll stick with 4, I think.
No, I think he'll stick. I think he'll stick with 4. I think he's got big decisions to make, though. We know Martin Dubravka is going to be touch and go with that illness.
I'd stick with Karius. I think he did. I think he did a good, decent enough job. If Martin Dubravka's not 100% fit, stick Karius in net. He made 2 or 3 great saves.
He was at fault for 1 or 2, though, wasn't he?
You think?
He was at fault for the 4th, I think. I think he should have kept that out. I know it took a deflection. He made some good saves. He kept them in it in the early stages. I thought he did well, considering it was, pretty much 365 days since he'd played competitively. But that's one decision to make. If Dubravka's not fully fit, he then has to go, do I stick with Livramento at left back?
I think it'll be Dan Burn.
I think it will be Dan Burn.
But it was the right call. Let's get this straight. It was the right call to leave Burn out against Arsenal.
Yeah, I think it was. And if I'm completely honest, I think it was the right call for Burn's sake. I think, some of the pressure he must be under recently must have really taken its toll. And it was the right thing to do because Newcastle's backline hasn't been keeping clean sheets, and the calls were getting too loud almost for Tino not to be brought back in.
And let's be fair, it didn't work entirely. There was, especially for one of the
I
goals.
thought Tino defensively, I thought was really
Yeah.
poor. And it's hard because look, he's up against one of the best right midfielders in the league.
But I still felt more confident in him being there than I would have done if it had been Dan Burn.
Yeah, I do know.
But admittedly,
yeah.
Saka did get the better of Tino Livramento, and that's why I do think he'll switch it. I think he'll go back to Dan Burn at left back, and I think it'll be Joe Willock for Lewis Miley. I think they're the changes he'll make.
And then he keeps the front three as they were.
Yeah.
Yeah, look, I think another positive that we probably haven't touched on is the fact that he does have real options now up front. I mean, you could argue that Harvey Barnes could start, Jacob Murphy could start.
Yeah, impressive little cameo. Barnes, a good little one or two.
Yeah, Murphy hasn't done too bad being back in the team.
Find the positives,
so.
Yeah, there's
There's loads of positives to talk about. So yeah, but I think look, tomorrow, just to talk about the game itself, he's got to go strongest team.
It's huge. It's massive.
It's season defining. It's pivotal. It's crucial. It's whatever word you want to throw at it. It is absolutely huge because if they go out tomorrow, I think the reaction will be very, very over the top.
The season rests on.
It hinges
on
on the FA Cup now, doesn't it? Completely,
and it does have a feel of the season under kind of Kenny Dalglish when they reached the final, and then Newcastle fell away in the league, and after those two seasons of finishing second, and Newcastle's season was just a bit in the Premier League, but they reached the final, and it feels like we're getting to that kind of tipping point where if Newcastle managed to go on this run to the final, then maybe finishing 9th or 10th, which is looking more likely than finishing 6th or 7th, wouldn't be the worst thing in the world if they get to the final. And then, of course, I mean, they'd have to win it to make it totally worthwhile, but it does have the feeling of that season. I mean, you were probably still in nappies, Aaron.
Yeah, I was.
So you don't know that, but all that people in the comments will know exactly what I'm talking about. But it is a huge game.
It's a huge game, and just on that, I've thought of another positive.
Oh, here we go.
And look, this isn't a positive about Saturday, but I think it's just good to maybe be positive when everyone else has been negative, because we both got stick last week for being negative on a podcast about Dan Ashworth. But people are saying that the season could be over if they lose to Blackburn. I don't agree with that at all. They're 9th at the minute, 37 points. Wolves one place above them on 38. Obviously, if they win on Saturday, they leapfrog them. Brighton on 39. Manchester United in 6th on 44. The season is not over if they lose to Blackburn.
I agree to an extent, but first off, I mean, you just said it was season defining. So how can the season? That sounds like a bit of a chuck reverse in there.
No, it's season defining because it defines how well the season is going to go and if it's a success or not. But I don't think the season is over if they lose tomorrow and they crash out the cup, because actually they've still got a really good chance of qualifying for Europe. It would take a real reversal of form, but they've still got to play Wolves. They've still got to play Manchester United as well, who crucially I think is the only away game that they've got in the top 10. So they've played the big boys now. So I don't agree with some people who were maybe saying it because of it was so quick after the game, saying, the season's over. It's not. The Europa Conference League would be a fantastic achievement this year, given the injuries, given the packed schedule they had. But let's not make no bones about it. If they crash out the Carabao Cup to Chelsea in those circumstances, they throw away Europe against AC Milan, and then they lose to Blackburn, all the whilst they're being 9th, then the reaction is going to be bad. But the season's not over. I
agree that it's not over when you look at the league table and how close they are to getting into Europe. But I just worry about the mental effects of going out of the cup competition, because you want that momentum. You want to know there's a real chance of winning something. And I think it sounds daft. I mean, beating Blackburn isn't just all about the FA Cup. It's about what it does for their league form really as well, because it will boost them going out. You then got 4 or 5 days to turn around against a Wolves side in really good form. That comes up a lot quicker than you'd want it to if you go out against Blackburn, and then the season might unravel. Like I say, the league table still looks really positive considering everything they've had to put up with. And Eddie Howe did call for a bit of perspective when you look at the results because of all the injuries they've had.
And also, if you zoom out even further, I think because last season was so good and they completely overachieved last season, it was always going to make this season tougher because Newcastle last season didn't have a top 4 squad. And you could argue that the progression was always going to be, let's try and finish between 10th and 7th, which they could quite easily still do this season, but it's going to be seen as a negative, isn't it? So, look, don't get me wrong, the Blackburn game is huge. And it goes back to, remember, over the new year when they lost to Liverpool and Sunderland was coming up, and it was hanging on that Sunderland game, wasn't it? And I think we're at a similar stage now where it's now hanging on the cup game once again.
And we'll talk a little bit more about the Blackburn game in a moment. I'm just going to dive into the comments. Plenty of guys watching live, so thank you very much for getting in touch. We've got John here saying, this sounds nuts, but what do you think? Tino and Hall at fullback, Trippier deep centre midfield with Bruno slightly further forward, Gordon on the right, Willock or Barnes on the left. Would you take that?
Yeah, you know what? And who was that? Who did
That's
that?
John there.
John, I don't think that actually sounds bad at all. You know what it is? It's interesting because Kieran Trippier actually played a little bit in centre midfield in the summer during the pre-season games. I remember the first half at Gateshead, especially, he was playing in that role. Eddie Howe's alluded to the fact that he can play there, and the last couple of weeks when we've had this conversation about they need a deep line midfielder and people saying, oh, well, could you drop Share there? I even saw people saying you could drop the Lascelles there. There's no mention of Kieran Trippier, but I actually don't think that would be the worst thing in the world. And it would allow Livramento in his natural position as well.
There we go. John says, I think to accommodate the gap between the defence and midfield, we could play 4-2-3-1. I would play Trippier, Lascelles, Bruno, Tino, Miley, Bruno, Murphy, Willock, Barnes and Isaac, rest Gordon, Longstaff, Miggy, and it gives you options off the bench. I mean, what would your reaction be out of that was the team sheet tomorrow night?
I think they've got to go. They've got to go as close to full strength as they can, surely. But yeah, look, as it say, it reaffirms that they do have options.
It certainly does. Gary says, I would have had Burn on anyway. I think Arsenal have scored more goals from set pieces than any other team. We lacked the height and physicality of Burn. I would have played 5 at the back. It seems 5 at the back is definitely the consensus of people going forward through the garden gate. Says, get Matt Ritchie in midfield over Sean Longstaff.
Not sure about that. Is he riding on the coattails of that goal against Bournemouth? I'm not sure about that one from the start.
And plenty of praise as well from people in the comments for Newcastle Women's, who've of course reached the League Cup final. Now, let's go on to Botman then. We've talked through some positives and we found more positives than maybe we thought we could, but we're going to have to just...
There'll be more to come before
we're going to have to make a little bit of reverse and head back to Botman. You briefly mentioned him earlier in the show. Look, he's going to be a very good defender. He is a very good defender. Many people say he's going to be the best defender since Jonathan Woodgate in black and white. And last season, we saw glimpses to why that comparison is being made. But he was very poor against Arsenal. Scores an own goal. Couldn't really do anything about that, really. But the second goal, he's just asleep, allows Martinelli to go past him. He puts it in Havertz. The third goal, gives the ball away. Newcastle do have enough time to recover, but they don't. He looks like he's lost a yard of pace. Has he been rushed back too soon, do you think? Eddie Howe was asked plenty about him, as you said, and he did reference the fact that he's still kind of getting back to the levels we know he can be. But what's the reasoning behind his fall from form?
I don't think you could say he's been rushed back because we're 12 games into Botman's return now. You know, it's not as if he sort of just came back in the team. But look, I think we're seeing the after effects of playing through an ACL injury that wasn't fully diagnosed when he first picked it up. As I've just said, you know, there's been no rotation since he came back in the team. He came off the bench at Fulham on the 16th of December, and he's featured in all 12 games since then. Eddie Howe, as I said, was asked a lot about it today, and by the fourth question, had to sort of come out and say, look, I don't think the focus should be on Botman. It shouldn't be on individuals. We were all, as a team, myself included, underperforming on Saturday. But it was telling for me that this is the first time really we've started to see Botman under a little bit of pressure. For the first time since he signed, we've been so used to him, you know, playing well, playing really well, that all of a sudden when you have the drop off, it's more noticeable. But I don't think Saturday was an isolated incident. I think we've seen the last 4 or 5 games, he's maybe been a little bit out of form. And I think it begs the question, and somebody's even put it in the comments in the last couple of minutes, you know, do you take him out the firing line for a couple of games, bring the Lascelles back in, who did fantastically well alongside Share?
I can see the reasoning, but I just don't think Eddie Howe will.
No,
I think tomorrow you will see Fabian Share and Sven Botman at centre back.
Yeah, I agree. And also, I think, I mean, just to think about poor Jamal Lascelles here, he does absolutely fantastic when he comes in the team against all odds, against what everyone's saying about him.
You
And
can't
then,
say that out loud. There's a lot of people who don't like Jamal Lascelles for whatever reason.
but then he's completely out the team. And I think if it was a different character and not Jamal Lascelles, who's all for the team and not for himself, bearing in mind he had opportunities to leave the club in both January and the summer, I think a different character would be knocking on Lady Howe's door saying, why am I not getting in this team who's absolutely leaking goals? But as I say, I don't think Lascelles will be doing that at all. But I think it's telling that. I mean, we've had a couple of people say it in the comments already. This podcast, we've had it a lot over the weekend after the game. People outright saying on social media, is it time to bring Lascelles back in for a game or two? It's the first time we've ever seen that, ever. A fit Sven Botman playing week in, week out, and people are saying, is it time to bring him out the team?
Well, there was a question, wasn't it, when Botman was finally fit and available to be picked, whether you would take Lascelles out because he was in such good form.
Yeah.
And like I say, I'm a big fan. I'd be giving him a new deal and keeping him at the club for at least the next season, at the very least, because I think he offers a real good alternative to what Newcastle have at the moment. Where man says, I think Jamal deserves a recall and to give Botman a rest. And he also says, do you think Newcastle will target a centre-half with pace in the summer, as we are badly lacking pace in our defence? And I guess the pace point is probably the key one, because Botman, yes, is having a bad time of it, but a bit like the defence for Burn, it's not just one player. The whole back four is just not added. Trippier's not the standard that we've come to expect. Fabian Schär is lacking something at the moment.
He's getting no younger as well.
Yeah, I think that the point is, it's a bit of a positive, I guess, that they will always go through these bad ups and downs when a form. They've missed Nick Pope. It's just because they're conceding so many goals that it's looking, well, it's not looking, it is a lot worse than it maybe could be if it was just one or two players out of form. But on the question about the summer, they've got to go after a centre back, haven't they?
I think they've got to go after a centre back, and I agree with the comment that it needs to be a pacey centre back, because I don't want this to seem like we're just completely hating on the back four. We're not. Individually, they're all fantastic. Collectively, last season and at parts of the season, they've been brilliant. But there's no denying that back four is not pacey at all. I memean, Trippier has lost a yard of pace over the last couple of years. Schär as well. Burn, you could argue, he's never really had that pace in his game. And Botman certainly looks like he's lost a yard of it. And I would even argue that Botman was never the quickest centre-back to start with. If they're going to go out and get a young centre-back, which we assume they will do in the summer, to play sort of backup or to rival Fabian Schär and be maybe the long-term heir to playing alongside Botman, I think you've got to look at someone with that turn of pace.
Yeah, most certainly. So that will not be cheap at all. And there's plenty of other positions as well in the summer where Newcastle United certainly need to target. But again, I suppose the whole issue about the defence, Aaron, is going back to the system, because at the moment, without the physicality in the middle of Joelinton, that system's just not working for Newcastle United, and it's exposing that lack of pace, isn't it, at the back?
Absolutely. And I think if you're Joelinton's agent, wherever you are in the world, you're sat there with the cigars out, knowing that a very, very hefty contract demand is probably going to be met in the near future, because I think it just reaffirms how crucial he's been, not just on Saturday, but the last couple of games. He's been such a huge miss. I mean, we already knew that before, didn't we? But I think it reaffirms it. And Hal was even asked the question along those lines today, how important has how bad has his absence been in recent weeks?
He was asked about his future as well, and he said that has always been in my mind as an absolute priority, i.e. getting a contract signed for Joelinton to try and get him to stay at the club long term. I see that as hugely important. So he's gone on record saying that. That's Eddie Howe publicly speaking about it. Doesn't often do that. What do you read into that? That he's confident of something getting done, or is this kind of a nod to the owner saying, look, if we've got to get one thing done before the summer, it's keeping this man?
I think it's a bit of both, because I think, one, just to look at Joelinton's situation at the minute, he's not a player who's asking to leave the club. He's basically saying, I want my standing at this football club to be, represented by my wages. He's watched his best mate Bruno get a very, very hefty pay rise. Sandro Tonali has came in alongside him and is now one of the top earners, and he wants to be along that. He's spoken publicly on the record as recently as December, saying he's happy at the club, he loves the club. But also I think it is a nod to the owners, who will also be fully aware of how important he is, to say, we need to tie this man down to a new deal in pronto.
Fingers crossed it can get sorted sooner rather than later. There were, as we said, some positives. We've mentioned Isak and Willock. Let's talk first about the Joe Willock goal, because it was a tremendous goal from Joe Willock. Dan Burn with the assist. It was just a really good team goal, a fantastic header as well. And kind of within, I don't know how long he actually had on the pitch, but what was it, 10, 15 minutes? Joe Willock kind of showed more in that area of the pitch than probably the three that have been playing in recent weeks. He got the goal. He had the energy about him. That's what Newcastle been missing in that area.
Yeah, really good cameo from him. I think it was 27 minutes in total. Good run out for him. And as you say, I mean, the last couple of months we've seen a lot from Sean Longstaff of running into the box late and scoring goals. Lewis Miley added that to his game around Christmas time, but the last couple of weeks it's been non-existent. As we say, the midfield in general has looked one pace. There was a moment on Saturday when Newcastle actually finally had the ball in Arsenal's box, and Isak had to sort of double back on himself. And there's a brilliant screenshot on social media of Isak alone in the box with about 8 Arsenal men surrounding him and no Newcastle help. Willock is going to, drastically improve that. As we said earlier, he's the goal scoring midfielder of that bunch who are now fit.
But if he's going to be the man to go forward, and we know he's box to box and he's got that energy about him, we saw that against Arsenal. Will that kind of just reaffirm the issues defensively, because you're going to have someone who is primarily an attacking midfield, not that he's playing in that role, but his mind's going to be right, I'm going forward. And that's kind of the issue at the moment, is that what you've actually got at the moment is Bruno, Miley and Longstaff all going forward. I guess the difference and the hope is that when Joe Willock goes forward, he's going to put the ball in the back of the net and Newcastle are going to get hit on the counter.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I'm not saying that Joe Willock's reintroduction to the team is suddenly going to solve their defensive problems, but I think that midfield in the last 18 months to 2 years has looked a lot more solid when it's had Joe Willock in it, whether he's been playing on the left of the three, on the left with Joelinton tucked in behind him. And also, crucially, it's just going to give a rest to some of these players, whether it be Longstaff, whether it be Miley. Should Bruno get that 10th yellow card, then it's, a good option to have there. Elliot Anderson as well on his way back, which is another
Matt Target too.
Which is another look more
positives.
Just
out the window, unbelievable scenes. I'm excited to
see
see Joe Willock back. I really am, and I think he'll start on Tuesday against Blackburn. And it's just nice to see players coming back, but also really important that they are making an impact as soon as possible. And he made that on Saturday.
And the work that he's put in behind the scenes the last 3 months has been remarkable. I mean, he's been training relentlessly at Benton. I mean, there was a time where players were jetting off for the holidays, and Howe kept a few of them back, Willock being one. Obviously, to have such a bad setback, considering he came back, played 3 games, obviously scored in his return against Manchester United, and then a couple of weeks later he's back on the sidelines again. He's missed so much of the season. It's been really hard for him personally, and yeah, he reminded on Saturdays to just how much he has been missed and how important he can be between now and May.
And then the man back was Alexander Isak. He had probably one shot, lovely touch and turn, and then he popped it over the top of the bar. He was very isolated. He got a very lonely figure, but just to have him back, he's come to the game unscathed. He'll start, hopefully, you would think anyway, against Blackburn on Tuesday. And it's just good to have that kind of instinctive out-and-out striker to hopefully put the ball in the back of the net. Yeah,
I was a little bit torn by the decision to take Isak off on Saturday, because it happened literally. I mean, Isak came off, and it sounds like he wasn't actually originally meant to come off. He was going to bring Gordon off and move Isak
to the
left, and he didn't. He changed his mind, and Isak comes off, and Newcastle make these changes just as they're starting to actually find a little bit of rhythm. It's at 2-0. Isaac's had a good effort. Gordon's had a good effort. They're starting to really put the pressure on. And then he brings Isak off, which I understand, and that's why I'm torn. You don't want to get too many minutes into him, especially considering how long he's been out for this season. And then obviously a couple of minutes later, Arsenal go up the other end and score. So I was a little bit torn to see him come off. But look, they just need to keep him fit now. Keep him fit, wrap him in cotton wool. But yeah, I mean, look, he's crucial to the way they play. I love watching him out on the left. He's the best option by far in the middle. You just need to cross your fingers on your toes that he manages to get through the next couple of months unscathed. And then, I mean, look, I would not be surprised to see him go under the knife in the summer for this groin injury while they've got a bit of time to get him back. Because that's 3 times now this season that he struggled with it. I think if it goes again, then they just need to bite the bullet with it.
I think that one I was impressed with, as I've mentioned, is Harvey Barnes. It was a really good run that he made. It would have been for the goal, actually, because then he feeds to Gordon, doesn't he? And Gordon feeds it back to Barnes. But you can just see he's got a bit of pace about him, and he does look kind of a level above quite a lot of players, actually. And I think having him as an option, someone who can fire on goal, someone who can feed the forward players, i.e. Isaac or Wilson, it's a tremendous option to have, and hopefully he can, continue to get a run of games, continue to get some minutes under his belt, and we're going to see the very best of him as soon as possible.
I think he really needs a run of games because he came obviously back into the team and scored against Luton with pretty much one of his first touches. But I think since then he's looked like a player who maybe needs a little bit of time to get up to speed with his new teammates to get those minutes into his legs. But one thing that he's offered time and time again across his career was goals and assists, and that's what Newcastle United could really do with now.
Wireman says surely Barnes should be starting ahead of Almiron.
Yeah, I mean, it's tricky because Barnes is. I mean, people could say he can play on the right, but Howe's never tried it. He was very, very sparingly used there at Leicester, so it would mean Gordon on the right. Is he as good on the right as he on the left? Probably not. So I don't know. It's an option though to have, and I think we will certainly see it off the bench. I don't know whether we'll see it from the start.
We are a long way from having a squad capable of top 4 every season, says Gary. I think not having 2 decent players for every position has hammered us severely with the injuries. We're not there yet. You agree with that?
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think, look, people might not like hearing it, but I think Arsenal, are years ahead of Newcastle in terms of the squad they've managed to build and the money they've actually had to spend, whereas Newcastle will need just a little bit longer until they're regularly, matching the likes of Arsenal and City and Liverpool.
Through the garden gates, as a number 1 priority in the summer must be a keeper, either number 1 with Pope becoming backup or backup that plays like Pope. As him being out of the team has affected it. It's a lot of pressure on one player.
Yeah, I don't know if it's priority number 1. I mean, I feel like all we do on this podcast talk about where the transfer priority is, but look, I think we're desperately missing Nick Pope at the back. I think it's just ridiculous how much of a difference it makes to the back 4 when he's behind them, sort of controlling, and seeing what they can't see. I certainly think it's a question though for future windows as to whether they go for an upgrade. I think one thing we saw on Saturday is that Newcastle really struggle playing out from the back. And I think with Pope not being too good with his feet, I wouldn't be surprised if they go out and say
there were so many mistakes on Saturday from the back.
So many. I mean, Sean Longstaff, the one thing he did do really well was deny that goal when Cher knocked the ball back.
Yeah, but again, the reaction straight after that. It's Sean. To be fair to Sean Longstaff, he does have a bit of a moan, but I don't know who he's moaning to. No one's listening to him. Like Cher's just kind of. It's just like you want a reaction, then you want a reaction.
Let's not turn that another positive that we found.
No, it's not. Negative, but do you not worry about that though? That the reaction's just not there for any of the goals.
Yeah, look, it's worrying, but it goes back to what we've said a couple of times already in this episode, and I think the bite and the hunger from the whole team, not just the back 4, is gone. And I think string a run of form together, get the wins going again, get the confidence back up, and you'll see that again.
Fingers crossed. So you were going to say something about?
But yeah, no. Look, I just think, I think I wouldn't say it's a priority for me. I think it's probably down the list. I think I'm really excited for Nick Pope to come back, but I think long term, I mean, Dubravka's getting no younger at all. Karius isn't the future, and Nick Pope is, even now approaching the business end of his career. It raises the question: do Newcastle in the next 2-3 windows need to go out and sign a really, really high level, good from playing out the back goalkeeper?
It won't be cheap at all. John says, I don't think the players are lacking fight or commitment. It's just at the moment we're disjointed and unbalanced, and the players can't thrive under these circumstances. It's an organisation thing. Do you agree with that? And if you do, then who does it fall upon to get them organised?
Well, I mean, all of them, really. I mean, how? The coaching staff, Trippier, Cher. I think they're missing Pope at the back, as I said, for that leadership. Clearly, the back 4 themselves, who are all leaders in their own right in that dressing room, aren't themselves. So yeah, I think it's a collective.
We've got Graham watching from holiday in South Africa. I hope you're having a lovely time, Graham. Says he watched the game on Saturday and have to put it down as a bad day at the office. There's a lot of bad days at the office recently. Do you just look at it and just say, "Oh, look, Arsenal are an elite side. Newcastle United are struggling with injuries.
No,
Players they are getting back. They're not fully fit. They're not match fit. It's just one of those things." Or do you have to look a little bit deeper and say, "Well, actually, look, that's not working. This isn't working, and it needs to be sorted out."
if Newcastle had went to the Emirates on Saturday and actually put up a fight and had more than, one touch in Arsenal's box in the first half and actually given them a real good go before they were 4-0 down, you could say, okay, well, look, you need to put it down to the fact that Arsenal are just on this run of form and they're better and they were stronger and whatever. But we couldn't have just sat here and said that because it wasn't true. Newcastle were really, really poor in their own right. But I do think for context, you do need to remember who they were playing. But I mean, they didn't lay a glove on them, did they?
And Leon says, "Why is the bike gone? They do look scared to tackle, and they did look unable to get a ball, foot on the ball." John says, "I reckon this might be our hottest transfer window to date, and we've done okay so far." And then Trill says, "I just pray we don't go for Billing or Solanke." I tell you what, right now,
you take anyone.
take anyone. I would take them too for the right price. Like they've been linked before. We've spoken about this in the last few weeks, but I don't understand the hatred towards these links. I mean, Solanke hasn't done it on a permanent basis where he's getting 15, 20 goals a season in the Premier League. So maybe you want him to go one more season before he does. But then if he hits that 20 goals next season, the price rockets up. So, there you go. And they're already asking 40, 50 million from Philip Billing and the rest. Philip Billing, I think just it's not always about getting someone who's better than the person there at the moment. It's about getting someone on that level and building the squad so that if that person is injured, okay, you've got someone to fill in. And like Philip Billing might cost you £15 million, decent pro, experience in the Premier League, knows Eddie Howe. I think he's a good player, and I think for the right price, he would be a very good squad player, which is what it's about as well. It's about making sure that you have, as Rafa Benitez used to say, the kind of the purple players, two in each position at the very least to make sure that you can cope for lack of form, suspensions and injuries. And we all know this season, the squad depth hasn't been there, and Billing might not set the world alight, but he would certainly add to it.
Yeah, I personally like both players. Myself, I've just got two slight issues with both signings, and I think Philip Billing would be a very good signing to bulk up the squad for probably quite cheap, if you can get him for 15, 20 million. One thing I will say is that he's probably played his best football in a number 10 role. And, we had this whole rigmarole of should they go out and sign James Maddison when he doesn't play in that position. It might be a similar case in that. Solanke, anybody who's listened to this podcast in the last 2 months when they were linked with him knows that I really like him. I don't understand the hate towards him, but I think for what Bournemouth are going to be charging because of how crucial he is to them, the money's better spent elsewhere, because I think you're probably in dreamland thinking that you'll get him for 50. I think Bournemouth will hold out for a lot more, and I think the money could be spent elsewhere. But I like both players. I really do.
But let's say they hold out for £60 million. You then look around Europe and you say, well, that striker there is going to cost you 60, 70 million pounds. But there's no guarantee that they can transfer their form from, say, Serie A or the Bundesliga into the Premier League. We have seen players who set the world alight in these leagues come to the Premier League. I mean, remember the Middlesbrough dude, Alves? He came from Holland and he scored something like 60 goals in 80 games. He was unbelievable. And Middlesbrough signed him for a club record. I think he ended up scoring 2 or 3 goals.
Of all the
I can give you another one. De Jong. I mean, there's
all the references to use, you've gone for Alfonso Alves at Borough in about 2008. That's so niche, but I rate it. But I do get the point. I get the point.
Who would you
but
pick?
I just
Doumbia. Here's another one.
Doumbia, brilliant on FIFA. Who would I pick? That's a really good question.
But the point is, there's loads of examples where they look so good in other leagues and transferred them. And maybe Newcastle's way of thinking is well, okay, look, he's hit. We know he can score in the Premier League. Is it? And they'll look close at him and they'll be thinking, is it a one season wonder, or can you do it on a more prolific basis?
Can I just flip that? I get the point, and it's a risk because he's not Premier League proven. But can I just flip that and say, Sven Botman, Ramirez, Alexander Isak?
Oh, it's always a gamble, isn't it?
It goes both ways, doesn't it? But I think for
goal scoring is the hardest job of them all, isn't it?
If Bournemouth wants 60 million, then I just don't know. I think the money is better spent elsewhere. And I don't like saying that because I don't want people to think that I don't like Dominic Solanke. I do. And I think don't think this is a flash in the pan. I think he looks like a real proven Premier League scorer now. But um,
Truel says it's not here, it's the stats. I get that. I get that. Wireman says he's been in a bad Bournemouth team in terms in the past and has improved with the forward thinking managers. So maybe Eddie Howe can take him to another level. One to watch in the summer. Prediction for tomorrow night?
I think they'll bounce. We're going to find even more positives here because I think they're going to bounce back with a Barnstorming 3-1 win.
It's live on the BBC, isn't it? And of course through our live blog. So I'm wondering if Shearer's going to be in the gantry.
Ranting and raving like he was on Saturday.
Good old Alan Shearer derby there, isn't it? And we'll have a very special view from the opposition going live tonight. Only got Newcastle United legend. Is he a legend? Well, he was held in very high regard. He's certainly a Blackburn legend in Kevin Gallagher. So watch out for that one this evening. I think Newcastle United will win tomorrow night. I think they'll get through the quarterfinals. I think it'll be a tough run, but I think they will get through. Ready for a bit of trivia? Right. So Newcastle United beat Blackburn 2-1 in the 5th round of the FA Cup in 2000 at Ewood Park. They actually also, if my memory serves me correctly, beat them in the 5th round replay the year before as well. I think actually the home tie was my first ever game at St James's Park.
Wow.
Remember it in the pouring rain. Horrendous 0-0 draw. I'm pretty sure, again, if my mind serves correctly, someone was sent off accidentally and he went down the tunnel and the referee had to call him back because he'd given him the wrong card in the pouring rain. He couldn't see the colours. But there you go. But yes, this is all about the 5th round in the year 2000 at Ewood Park. 2 goals from Shearer. He was getting a bit of stick upon his return to Ewood Park and he surely shut them up with that brace. But can you name the squad?
Okay. 2000.
2000. So do you want to just shout some names out? You're going to go for position?
I'll shout some names out. I'll give it a go. We'll go Shea Given and goal.
Nope, he's on the bench.
Good start. Steve Harper.
Steve Harper, number 1.
Getting his cup games in there. Well, Stevie. Right back, we will go for. Actually, no, we won't go right back. We'll go centre back. We'll go. Bramble.
Bramble?
Oh, actually,
he's probably 5.
No, that won't be daft. Too early for Woodgate.
Bramble's a terrible shout. He's a man who scored a fantastic goal in the derby.
Yeah, Derby's ass.
Yeah.
We'll go left back. We'll go Bernard.
Nope. Too early for Bernard again.
Too early for Bernard.
He's another man who scored a goal in the derby. Actually, this fella on loan. He was at Newcastle on loan and scored in the derby.
4-4-2 here.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll go Solano right mid.
Nope.
Speed in the middle.
Yep. Gary Speed in the middle.
Was that too early for Dyer in the middle?
No, Dyer's not in the middle though. He's out on the right.
Okay, Dyer on the right.
I've just mentioned this fellow actually. Funnily enough, he was on the left.
Gallagher.
Yep.
You mentioned that tonight. So we need another centre midfielder. 2000. We'll go for.
You threw some shade on this fella last week on your TikTok.
Rob Lee. Didn't throw shade on him at all.
You picked you anchored by over Rob Lee.
We're talking favourite Newcastle players. Let me know in the comments if your favourite Newcastle player is Rob Lee or Johan Cabaye.
It's not even going to be a competition, that.
Right, 2 up front. We'll go Shearer since he scored a brace.
Yeah.
And we'll go for.
This is a partnership I wish I'd seen more of.
John Dale Thomason.
No. No, I think he was on his way by then.
I don't know.
Go on.
Lualawa?
Nah.
Who?
Duncan Ferguson.
Oh, okay.
Duncan Ferguson. And then, so that leaves you with 3 to get. Well, that gives 3. Well, let's start 11, 3 at the back, and we'll go into the subs in a second. So you've got a man at right back who, when he signed for Newcastle, was the most expensive British defender at the time.
Oh, I don't know.
Signed in 1995 by Kevin Keegan. Curtains.
Barton.
Warren Barton. In the middle, an Italian.
Pistoni.
That's the one. And at left back, come on, he scored. He was on loan. He scored in the derby.
Yeah, give me it.
Helder. And then the subs, we've got a French fullback.
Domi.
He actually came off the bench, and I think he assisted one of the goals. Then you've got a man who assisted Alan Shearer in the semi-final of that year, if I'm not mistaken. He passed it against Spurs.
Oh, I know the goal. Oh, it's a lovely goal. That is that your favourite Shearer goal, or have I just made that?
It's the second.
Yeah, I can't remember who.
It's more my favourite commentary because I think Clive Tilsley sums it up perfectly. That's how he dreamt it last night. Still your marriage. Then we've got a defender who was very versatile, Northern Irish international.
Peacock. No.
Aaron Hughes.
Oh, Hughes. Yeah, sorry. I was thinking Northern Irish.
Your data all over the shop. Hey, goodness. Hey, I think Dan Peacock might have actually playing for Blackburn at that point, potentially. And if anyone gets this right, I'll be very surprised. I'm not even gonna let you guess because you'll just embarrass yourself by saying George Robledo or something.
Oh,
go on.
Give me the clue.
Well, I haven't got a clue. I mean, that's it. It begins with F. I don't know.
Okay.
I think he's either Brazilian or Portuguese. Fumaca. I'm not even sure how many games he played, but there you go. The squad that beat Blackburn in the 5th round at Ewood Park in the year 2000 as Newcastle headed back to Wembley. Yeah, and they got beat. I know they wouldn't have headed to Wembley. They would have headed to the semi-final against Chelsea. The goal that I was talking about why Shearer came the year before, didn't it? Yeah.
Old Trafford.
Because Robley scored in the semi against Chelsea and Poyet crushed our dreams, unfortunately. But kind of Freer's got a few macca there. So well done with that. Thank you very much for tuning in. A pleasure as always. Head over to chroniclelive.co.uk for all the latest Newcastle United news, including everything that Eddie Howe had to say ahead of the trip to Ewood Park. And our live blog will be covering the game against Blackburn in the FA Cup. Be underway tomorrow afternoon. And for myself now, we'll see you guys very soon.